Imagine you are standing in a crowd. Look to your left, then to your right. The faces blur together, a sea of averageness. Nothing remarkable jumps out. No supermodels. No grotesque deformities. Just people. Average people. Now consider this: what if that very averageness, the quality that seems to define mediocrity, is actually a superpower? In 1878, scientist Francis Galton made a curious discovery while examining composite photographs of criminals. When multiple faces were overlaid, the resulting average face was not just unremarkable. It was actually more attractive than most of the individual faces that composed it. The imperfections canceled each other out, leaving something strangely appealing. This phenomenon, which scientists now call the beauty and averageness effect, challenges everything we think we know about standing out and fitting in. But it is merely one thread in a much larger tapestry of evidence suggesting that there might be a strange, counterintuitive advantage to being average. We have been told our entire lives to be exceptional, to rise above, to stand out from the crowd. But what if nature itself has been quietly rewarding mediocrity all along? The mathematics of survival and reproduction, the cold equations of natural selection, seem to have a peculiar preference for the middle ground. And this preference shows up everywhere we look, in faces, in behavior, in genetics, and even in the strategies employed by entire species across evolutionary time. This is not just about looking attractive or fitting in socially. This is about a fundamental principle that might govern life itself, from single-celled organisms to complex human societies. A principle that whispers, extreme is risky, average is safe. But why? How could evolution, a process we typically associate with the survival of the fittest, the strongest, the most exceptional, actually favor mediocrity in so many contexts? That is what we are about to explore. The year was 1974. Robert Trivers and Dan Willard, two evolutionary biologists, were puzzling over a strange pattern they had observed in certain animal populations. When resources were scarce, mothers seemed to produce more female offspring. When resources were plentiful, more males appeared. This made no mathematical sense at first glance. The overall sex ratio in most populations hovers around 50-50. But then they realized, evolution is not concerned with fairness. It is concerned with maximizing the spread of genes. In many species, including our own, males represent a high-risk, high-reward reproductive strategy. A successful male can father hundreds of offspring, while an unsuccessful male might father none. Females, on the other hand, are limited in the number of offspring they can produce, but they are much more likely to reproduce at least once. When conditions are good, it pays to gamble on males. The potential reward is enormous. When conditions are poor, it is safer to bet on females' lower variance but more reliable returns. This was one of the first major scientific insights into what would eventually be called bet hedging, an evolutionary strategy that often favors the average over the exceptional. It is not about having the highest possible reproductive success, explains Dr. Tara Vickers, an evolutionary biologist at Cambridge University. It is about having the lowest chance of complete failure. In essence, life is not just a single game of poker where going all in might make sense. It is an infinite series of games, and the primary goal is to stay at the table. The most aggressive strategies often lead to early elimination. This principle extends far beyond sex ratios. It appears in countless aspects of biology, from the way genes express themselves to the way animals behave in groups. The average often thrives because extremes are punished more severely than mediocrity. Consider the case of the peppered moth in Industrial Revolution England. Before the pollution darkened the trees, the light-colored moths were camouflaged against lichen-covered bark. When soot covered everything, the rare dark moths suddenly had the advantage. But notice what happened. In both cases, it was not about being the brightest or the darkest moth possible. It was about matching your environment, about being average for your context. This is where we begin to see that average does not mean identical or unchanging. Rather, it means appropriate for current conditions. And as conditions change, so too does the definition of average. When we talk about averageness in evolution, we are not talking about stagnation. We are talking about a dynamic, responsive strategy that has been honed over billions of years of natural selection. But to truly understand why average often wins in the game of life, we need to examine one of the most counterintuitive concepts in all of statistics: regression to the mean. In 1886, Francis Galton, the same scientist who discovered the beauty and averageness effect, was studying the heights of human beings. He noticed something peculiar. Very tall parents tended to have children who were tall, but not quite as tall as them. Very short parents tended to have children who were short, but not quite as short. He called this phenomenon regression toward mediocrity, and it confounded him at first. It seemed to suggest that, over time, everyone would converge to the same height. But that is not what happens in reality. What Galton had discovered was a statistical principle, not a biological one. Extreme values in any bell curve distribution tend to be followed by less extreme values, not because there is a mystical force pulling everything toward average, but simply because extreme values are rare by definition. Think of it this way: extremely tall people are usually tall not just because of their genes, but because of a lucky combination of genes, nutrition, health during development, and other factors. Their children inherit only the genetic component, not all those other lucky factors. So they tend to be closer to average. This principle, regression to the mean, shows up everywhere. Academic test scores, athletic performance, business success, even the weather. After extreme events, things tend to move back toward the average. But regression to the mean is not just a statistical curiosity. It actually shapes how natural selection operates, creating what scientists call stabilizing selection, a pressure that favors average individuals over extreme ones. Imagine a population of birds, says Dr. Ryan York, an evolutionary geneticist at Stanford University. Birds with very small beaks might struggle to crack open seeds. Birds with enormously large beaks might expend too much energy growing and maintaining those beaks, or might be too specialized for one type of food. The birds with average-sized beaks, not too small, not too large, often have the highest overall fitness. This pattern repeats across countless traits and countless species. Stabilizing selection tends to eliminate extremes and favor the middle of the distribution. It is a fundamental force shaping life on Earth. But it gets even more interesting when we look at how these principles apply specifically to human beings, particularly in the realm of attractiveness and mate selection. The beauty and averageness effect that Galton stumbled upon in the 1800s has been repeatedly confirmed by modern researchers. When images of human faces are digitally blended together, the composite faces are consistently rated as more attractive than most of the individual faces that went into them. At first, scientists thought this might be because the blending process creates smoother skin and more symmetrical features, both known contributors to attractiveness. But further research showed something deeper at work. In 1990, psychologists Judith Langlois and Lori Rogman conducted a landmark study. They created composite faces from 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 individual photographs. The more faces included in the composite, the more attractive it was rated. The 32 face composites were judged significantly more attractive than almost all of the individual faces. Why would we find average faces more attractive? The answer appears to lie in what averageness signals to our unconscious mind. An average face is essentially a face without unusual features, explains Dr. York. From an evolutionary perspective, unusual features might indicate genetic mutations or developmental problems. Average features suggest genetic normalcy, an absence of harmful mutations. But there is more to it than that. An average face is also a face that contains features common in the population, features that have been tested by natural selection across many generations and have proven viable. Averageness signals genetic reliability. This preference extends beyond faces. Research shows that we tend to prefer average body types, average voices, and even average personality traits in potential mates. We are drawn to the familiar, the typical, the proven. This does not mean that uniqueness has no value. Cultural factors, individual preferences, and the need for genetic diversity all pull against the gravity of averageness. But the underlying biological preference remains. And here we encounter a fascinating paradox. While we are programmed to seek averageness in our mates, we simultaneously strive to be exceptional ourselves. We want to stand out, to be special, to rise above the crowd. This tension between our attraction to the average and our desire to be exceptional creates a complex dynamic in human societies. It shapes our social hierarchies, our mating patterns, and even our emotional lives. But to fully understand this dynamic, we need to look beyond physical attractiveness. We need to examine how averageness manifests in our behavior, our skills, and our cognitive abilities. Consider the realm of expertise. We might assume that experts in any field would employ specialized, exceptional approaches to problems. But research consistently shows something different. In a groundbreaking study published in 2005, psychologists James Shantou and David Weiss examined how experts make decisions across various fields, from medicine to livestock judging. They found that experts typically do not use exotic or unique strategies. Instead, they employ the most common, well-established methods, but they execute them with exceptional consistency and precision. Expertise is not about having a special method that nobody else has, Dr. Shantou explained in an interview. It is about reliably applying the standard methods without error or distraction. The best chess players do not make moves that would never occur to average players. They just never make the obvious mistakes that average players make. This pattern appears across virtually all domains of expertise. The best writers do not use the most exotic vocabulary. They use common words with uncommon precision. The best athletes do not use techniques unavailable to others. They execute the fundamentals with extraordinary consistency. The best scientists do not employ mysterious methods. They apply the scientific method with unusual rigor. Excellence, in other words, often comes not from exceptional methods but from exceptional execution of average methods. This principle extends to group dynamics as well. When complex problems need to be solved, we might assume that a team of exceptional specialists would outperform a team of well-rounded generalists. But research on collective intelligence shows a different pattern. In 2010, scientists at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence conducted a series of experiments with small groups. They found that the average intelligence of group members was a poor predictor of collective performance. What mattered much more was social sensitivity, conversational turn-taking, and the proportion of females in the group, all factors that led to more balanced participation. Groups dominated by one or two exceptional voices typically underperformed groups with more evenly distributed contribution patterns. The wisdom of crowds emerged not when exceptional individuals led the way, but when average perspectives were aggregated through balanced interaction. The brilliance of one person almost never compensates for the silencing of others, says organizational psychologist Dr. Thomas Reynolds. The most innovative organizations are not those with the most brilliant individuals, but those with the most effective collaboration among diverse perspectives. This insight has profound implications for how we structure our educational systems, our workplaces, and our social institutions. If average execution beats exceptional method, and balanced groups outperform star-driven groups, then perhaps we should recalibrate our emphasis on identifying and promoting exceptional individuals. But this raises a troubling question. If averageness confers so many advantages, why do we see such extreme variation in nature and in human societies? Why are there still genius outliers and radical innovators if being average is so beneficial? To answer this, we need to understand that natural selection operates not just on individuals, but on populations as a whole. Imagine a population of rabbits. If all rabbits had identical traits, the average fur color, the average running speed, the average sensitivity to predators, the entire population would be vulnerable to any environmental change that made those average traits suddenly disadvantageous. If a new predator appears that can easily spot that particular shade of fur, or if a climate shift makes that running speed inadequate, the entire population could be wiped out. Variation within the population, including extreme outliers, provides a form of insurance against such catastrophes. Variation is a population-level adaptation, explains Dr. Vickers. Individual extremes might be disadvantaged most of the time, but their existence protects the population as a whole against unforeseen changes. The presence of outliers is a hedge against uncertainty. This explains why natural selection has not eliminated extreme traits despite generally favoring the average. The occasional genius, the occasional revolutionary innovator, the occasional radical mutation, these are the population's insurance policy against an unpredictable future. Human societies have institutionalized this principle through cultural practices that protect and nurture outliers. We celebrate exceptional achievement, we fund innovative research, we elevate revolutionary thinkers. We do this not just because we admire their accomplishments, but because we intuitively understand that innovation often comes from the margins, not from the center. The genius who sees what no one else can see, the artist who creates what no one else can imagine, the entrepreneur who builds what no one else would risk. These exceptions to the rule of averageness provide the raw material for cultural and technological evolution. But here we encounter another paradox. The average individual benefits from living in a population with outliers, but the outliers themselves often pay a price for their exceptionality. Studies of highly creative individuals, for instance, consistently find elevated rates of mental illness. Research on exceptionally intelligent children shows they often struggle with social integration. Historical analyses of revolutionary thinkers reveal patterns of isolation, conflict, and personal suffering. The gift of exceptionality often comes with the curse of alienation. The same traits that make outliers valuable to the population as a whole can make them vulnerable as individuals. This creates a complex dynamic. Society needs its outliers, but outliers need protection and support from society. The tension between averageness and exceptionality plays out not just in our biology, but in our social structures and cultural values. To fully appreciate this dynamic, we need to examine how it manifests in one of the most complex and consequential realms of human experience: decision-making under uncertainty. In 1906, British scientist Francis Galton attended a county fair where visitors were invited to guess the weight of an ox. About 800 people participated, including both experts, farmers, butchers, and novices. After the contest, Galton collected the tickets and calculated the average guess. The result astonished him. The crowd's average guess was 1,197 pounds. The actual weight of the ox, 1,198 pounds. The collective judgment had been almost perfect. This phenomenon, now known as the wisdom of crowds, has been demonstrated in countless contexts since. When large groups of people make independent judgments about uncertain quantities or outcomes, the average of their judgments is often remarkably accurate, more accurate than most individual judgments, including those of experts. Financial markets, prediction markets, forecasting tournaments, and various crowdsourcing platforms all harness this principle. The aggregate judgment converges on the truth not because any individual has perfect knowledge, but because individual errors tend to cancel each other out in the aggregate. But the wisdom of crowds only emerges under specific conditions. Participants must make independent judgments, they must be diverse in their perspectives and information sources, and they must not be systematically biased in the same direction. When these conditions are met, average judgments outperform exceptional judgments with remarkable consistency. The collective wisdom of ordinary people beats the specialized knowledge of experts. This has profound implications for how we make decisions in complex, uncertain environments. The impulse to rely on star performers, exceptional individuals, or specialized experts often leads us astray. The boring, unsexy, average judgment of a diverse crowd frequently yields better results. We are naturally drawn to exceptional voices, notes decision scientist Dr. Rachel Thompson. We want the brilliant insight, the revolutionary idea, the genius solution. But in complex, uncertain domains, these exceptional perspectives are often no better than random guesses. The wisdom lies in the average. This principle extends beyond explicit predictions to implicit behaviors and strategies. In uncertain, complex environments, average strategies often outperform specialized or extreme strategies over the long run. Consider investing. Studies consistently show that simple index funds, which essentially buy the average of the entire market, outperform about 80% of actively managed funds over any 10-year period. The financial experts who try to beat the market by making exceptional investment choices almost always underperform the boring strategy of simply buying the average. Or consider entrepreneurship. While we celebrate the rare billionaire founders, research shows that the average entrepreneur earns less over their lifetime than they would have earned as an employee. The exceptional success stories mask the much more common failures. In domain after domain, from sports betting to political forecasting, from venture capital to executive hiring, we find the same pattern. Strategies that chase exceptional outcomes underperform strategies that embrace the average. But this creates a paradox for individuals. If average strategies perform best, but we all want to be above average, how should we navigate this contradiction? The answer lies in understanding that average does not mean identical or mediocre. It means aligning with the central tendencies that have been shaped by natural selection and cultural evolution over time. Being average does not mean abandoning ambition or excellence. It means recognizing that true excellence often comes from mastering the fundamentals rather than pursuing exotic innovations. It means understanding that resilience over time often matters more than spectacular performance in a single instance. The average strategy is not about settling for less, explains psychologist Dr. Taylor Vincent. It is about optimizing for the long game rather than the short game. It is about sustainable success rather than spectacular but fleeting triumph. This perspective challenges our cultural obsession with exceptional achievement and radical innovation. It suggests that many of our institutions, from educational systems that identify and promote gifted students, to corporate cultures that disproportionately reward star performers, may be misaligned with the actual dynamics that produce sustainable success. But the advantage of averageness extends beyond decision-making and strategy. It appears in our psychological well-being as well. Studies consistently show that extreme personality traits, even positive ones like conscientiousness or openness to experience, are associated with increased risk of psychological distress when present at very high levels. Moderate levels of most personality traits predict better long-term mental health outcomes than extreme levels. Even happiness follows this pattern. Research in positive psychology has found that moderately positive mood states enhance creativity, problem-solving, memory, and social connection more effectively than extremely positive states. Too much happiness can be as counterproductive as too little. There appears to be an optimal range for most psychological variables, notes Dr. Vincent. Too little is problematic, but too much can be equally problematic in different ways. The sweet spot tends to be in the middle, not at the extremes. This principle, that extremes in either direction can be problematic, shows up repeatedly in biology, psychology, and social systems. It is so common that scientists have given it a name: hormesis. Hormesis describes the pattern where moderate exposure to stressors or challenges improves function, while both excessive exposure and insufficient exposure impair function. Exercise provides a perfect example. Too little causes weakness, too much causes injury, but moderate amounts strengthen the body. This pattern appears in our response to almost everything: psychological stress, caloric intake, environmental temperature, social stimulation, cognitive challenge, and countless other variables. The optimal level is rarely the minimum or the maximum. It is usually somewhere in the middle. And this brings us back to the advantage of being average. Average, in this context, does not mean precisely at the mathematical mean of the population. It means within the central range, the range that has been selected for over evolutionary time as providing the best balance of benefits versus costs. But this raises a profound question. If averageness confers so many advantages, why do we feel such a powerful drive to be exceptional? Why do human beings universally strive to stand out, to achieve distinction, to rise above the crowd? The answer may lie in another evolutionary principle: sexual selection. While natural selection favors traits that enhance survival, sexual selection favors traits that enhance reproductive success, specifically traits that make an individual more attractive to potential mates. And these two forces do not always push in the same direction. Consider the peacock's tail. From a pure survival perspective, it is a disaster. Heavy, cumbersome, energy-intensive to grow and maintain, and highly visible to predators. But peahens find it irresistibly attractive, so peacocks with the most elaborate tails father more offspring. Humans striving for exceptionality may function similarly. Standing out from the crowd, through achievements, possessions, or distinctive traits, can enhance status and attractiveness even if it does not enhance survival directly. We want to be exceptional because exceptionality signals something to potential mates and allies, explains evolutionary psychologist Dr. Ryan York. It signals access to resources, creative intelligence, or social influence, all qualities that could benefit a mate or ally. This creates a fascinating tension in human psychology. Our biology pulls us toward averageness in many domains: facial features, personality, cognitive strategies, while simultaneously pushing us to distinguish ourselves through exceptional achievements or displays. We want to be normal enough to be accepted but special enough to be chosen. We want the safety of fitting in and the thrill of standing out. We are caught between the gravitational pull of the average and the rocket fuel of ambition. This tension manifests in virtually every aspect of human society. Our educational systems struggle to balance standardization with individualization. Our workplaces oscillate between team cohesion and star recognition. Our relationships navigate the boundaries between comfortable familiarity and exciting novelty. We are constantly trying to resolve the fundamental paradox. How can I be both average enough to belong and exceptional enough to matter? The resolution may lie in understanding that true exceptionality often emerges from the mastery of average principles rather than from their rejection. The greatest innovations typically build on established foundations rather than abandoning them entirely. The most influential thinkers understand conventional wisdom deeply before transcending it. Excellence, in other words, may not be about escaping averageness but about embodying its highest expression. The truly exceptional are not those who reject the fundamental patterns that natural selection has established. They are those who execute those patterns with extraordinary precision, consistency, and insight. This perspective offers a way out of the averageness-exceptionality paradox. We can embrace the advantages of alignment with evolutionarily tested patterns while still pursuing excellence within those patterns. We can accept our fundamental similarity to others while still expressing our unique combination of traits and talents. But this raises a deeper question. If the advantage of averageness is so pervasive in biology and psychology, why have human societies increasingly emphasized and rewarded exceptionality? The answer may lie in the changing nature of our environment, specifically in the shift from natural to artificial selection pressures. For most of human evolutionary history, we lived in small groups where survival depended on cohesion, cooperation, and adherence to established patterns. Radical deviation from group norms was rarely rewarded and often punished. But as human societies grew larger and more complex, new selection pressures emerged. Specialized roles created space for specialized skills. Trading networks rewarded innovative products. Status hierarchies became more elaborate, creating new pathways to social advancement. Modern industrial and post-industrial economies have accelerated this trend. Mass markets allow exceptional performers to reach global audiences. Technologies enable winner-take-all dynamics where small advantages translate into enormous disparities in outcomes. Educational systems identify and promote outlier talent from an early age. In this artificial environment, the natural advantage of averageness can be overwhelmed by the cultural advantage of exceptionality. The person who fits in perfectly may survive comfortably, but the person who stands out spectacularly may thrive extraordinarily. This creates a conundrum for individuals navigating contemporary society. The biological wisdom of averageness pulls in one direction, while the cultural incentives for exceptionality pull in another. How should we resolve this tension? Perhaps the answer lies in timescales. Natural selection optimizes for long-term survival across generations. Cultural selection often optimizes for short-term success within a single lifetime or even a single career phase. The advantage of averageness becomes more apparent the longer the time frame you consider. Notes Dr. Vickers. Spectacular success in the short term often comes with hidden costs that manifest in the long term. Sustainable success typically involves finding an optimal balance rather than maximizing a single variable. This suggests a different way of thinking about achievement and success. Rather than asking, "How can I be exceptional?" we might ask, "How can I be sustainably effective?" Rather than striving to maximize performance in the short term, we might focus on optimizing performance across the full span of our lives. From this perspective, the advantage of averageness is not about settling for mediocrity. It is about aligning with the deep patterns that evolution has tested over millions of years. It is about recognizing that the fundamentals matter more than the flourishes, that consistency trumps occasional brilliance, that balance beats extremes in the long run. But this raises a final, profound question. If the advantage of averageness is real and significant, why has evolution not eliminated variance entirely? Why do extreme outliers, both positive and negative, persist in every human trait and ability? The answer may lie in the nature of evolutionary fitness itself. Fitness is not a fixed target but a moving landscape that changes with environmental conditions, population dynamics, and random events. In stable environments, stabilizing selection favors the average. But in changing environments, disruptive selection can favor the extremes. When conditions shift rapidly, being different, even radically different, can suddenly become advantageous. Human history has been marked by accelerating change, technological, social, and ecological. In such environments, maintaining genetic and behavioral diversity within the population becomes an adaptive strategy in itself. The outliers who seem maladapted in one context may become the founders of new adaptations in another. Evolutionary success is not just about optimizing for current conditions, explains Dr. York. It is about maintaining the capacity to adapt to future conditions. Diversity, including the presence of extreme outliers, is a form of insurance against uncertainty. This insight offers a profound resolution to the tension between averageness and exceptionality. Both serve essential functions in the grand evolutionary drama. The average maintains stability and reliability. The exceptional provides adaptability and innovation. Both are necessary for the long-term flourishing of any complex system. Human societies, at their best, create space for both. They provide a stable foundation of shared values, practices, and institutions that allow most people to thrive in predictable ways. And they create niches, opportunities, and protections for the outliers who push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and explore new possibilities. The healthiest societies do not force everyone toward the average, nor do they exclusively celebrate the exceptional. They recognize the distinct contributions of both and create contexts where each can fulfill its essential function. And perhaps this is the most profound implication of the strange advantage of being average. It teaches us to value not just the exceptional individual, but the diverse population. It reminds us that evolutionary success is a collective achievement, not just an individual one. It shows us that the true miracle of life is not the occasional genius, but the beautiful balance of variation and constraint that allows complex systems to both maintain stability and generate novelty. In the end, the advantage of averageness is not really about mediocrity at all. It is about finding the optimal balance point, the golden mean that maximizes long-term flourishing. It is about recognizing that excellence often emerges not from rejecting patterns but from mastering them. It is about understanding that true wisdom lies not in extremes but in the dynamic equilibrium between opposing forces. And perhaps most importantly, it is about embracing our fundamental connectedness. The average is not a point but a relationship between each individual and the larger whole of which they are a part. To be average in the deepest sense is not to be mediocre but to be integrated, to find one's proper place in the intricate web of life. In a culture obsessed with standing out and breaking molds, the strange advantage of being average reminds us of an ancient truth. We are not separate from the patterns that created us. We are expressions of those patterns, and our highest achievement may not be to transcend them, but to embody them with conscious awareness and creative engagement. The true advantage of averageness lies not in settling for less, but in recognizing that we are part of something larger than ourselves, a grand evolutionary experiment that has been unfolding for billions of years. Our individual lives gain their deepest meaning not from exceptional achievement but from conscious participation in this magnificent process. Perhaps this is the final paradox. By embracing the advantage of being average, we connect to something far greater than any individual exceptionality could ever achieve. We become knowing participants in the ancient dance of life, a dance that favors neither the exceptional nor the average exclusively, but the dynamic interplay between them. Nature does not ask us to be extraordinary. It asks us to be appropriately adapted to our circumstances. And in that simple request lies a profound liberation. We do not need to be exceptional to matter. We simply need to find our proper place in the pattern and fulfill it with awareness and integrity. The strange advantage of being average is not about lowering our ambitions, but about aligning them with the deeper rhythms of life itself, finding the balance point where individual flourishing and collective resilience meet in perfect harmony.